One day I was doing sit-ups and I felt some lumps under my chin. I went to the doctor and I said, I have these lumps under my chin. I think they're, swollen lymph nodes. He said, I don't feel anything. Off the cuff, I said, I have this bump under my arm. And he felt it and he said, you need to get checked out immediately. Hi, my name is Dana and I live in Vancouver, Canada. I have stage 4 breast cancer. And I am blessed to live with my husband and two birth children and a wonderful dog. And I was originally trained as a clinical psychologist. I was initially diagnosed with breast cancer, invasive ductal carcinoma in 2020. It was discovered through my yearly mammogram. I had a biopsy, and it was seen to be cancer. It was stage 1. I had radiation. I had a lumpectomy. The end. I sometimes forget about that time now. Come a few years later, I had no real symptoms, but I had this bump under my arm, and it didn't hurt. It just existed there, and I ignored it. I completely ignored it. I thought it was maybe an ingrown hair. So I thought, well, this will reduce in size over time. I'm not worried about it. But it continued to exist. And I continued to ignore it to the point where my husband was saying, you need to get that looked at. I rolled my eyes. Okay. I still put it off. One day I was doing sit-ups and I felt some lumps under my chin. And then he said, go to the doctor. So I went to the doctor and I said, I have these lumps under my chin. I think they're, swollen lymph nodes. He said, I don't feel anything. Off the cuff, I said, I have this bump under my arm. And he felt it and he said, you need to get checked out immediately. People nagged me to get it looked at. It didn't even occur to me that that could be a lymph node. It didn't, my parents were both, my father was a pharmacologist. My mother taught microbiology and immunology. So we had a lot of science growing up, a lot of medical knowledge growing up. So I would think that I recognize a swollen lymph node, but I didn't. And I wonder if not consciously, unconsciously, I put that to the side because I wonder if there's a part of me that knew that there's something untoward happening here. And I'm very upset to that till this day, that I ignored it. Therein lies the cascade of appointments and whatnot and biopsies, which turned out to be cancer within the lymph node. I still wasn't that worried. It was still a low stage. And then I had a full body MRI. Um, and for some reason, I was able to get the results of that without having anyone speak to me. And I was sitting on the floor in my bedroom, and I remember sucking in my breath. And I said to my husband, oh my God, there were liver metastases, bone metastases, lymph nodes. And I said to him, this is stage 4. And of course, I'm not a doctor and I can't officially uh, diagnose that, but that seemed pretty clear to me. And when I talked to an oncologist who has become my oncologist, he said, yeah, this is stage 4. We need to get you on treatment immediately. This kind of stunned silence. I guess I would call it denial. I didn't register it. I didn't feel it viscerally that this is stage 4 breast cancer. That My mother had stage 1 breast cancer, and it devastated the family when this happened decades ago. Uh, my first thoughts when I had that was, oh my God, how am I going to tell this to my kids? And I think a part of me is still in denial. I haven't really cried about it. I've just been in this zone of how do we cope next? I would like to cry about it. Now that I look back, I think I've been very lucky. Targeted therapy, ribociclib, and then a hormone blocker because my cancer is estrogen positive, but progesterone negative. Doesn't really make that much of a difference, just a little. So on targeted therapy and letrozole hormone blocker. Um, to assist in that, I take an injection of Zoladex monthly, and every 3 months I have Zometa for my bones. I have a lot of side effects, um, but they're not, they're atypical. Uh, I have nausea. I have, uh, I become very sleepy very easily. I think the most profound side effects is that it has impacted my psychology greatly. It's at the combination of my chemotherapies appears to have me be very psychologically scattered and unsteady and running through the gamut of emotions in a moment's notice. It's very scary because I don't feel particularly stable because of that. And is just recently it's been quite profound. So my oncologist is scattering with the associated patient counseling unit to figure out what's wrong. The plan is I get CT scans every 3 months. I'm getting an MRI. I'm getting a brain MRI just to rule out any kind of mets, considering my really quick um, emotional uh, 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 discontrol, if you want to call it that. Um, And then I'm indefinitely on my targeted therapy and hormone blockers because so far they've worked. In terms of my CT scans, they show that there's been shrinkage of all of my tumors. I'm not no evidence of disease, but so far everything is primarily stable, maybe a tiny bit of progression, but my oncologist says that this is nothing to worry about, and so far there's stability, thank goodness. Prior to my diagnosis, I have dealt with mental health issues for the past 20, 30 years or so. Um, but they were stabilized enough so I was able to go to graduate school and earn my doctorate, which was exceedingly interesting. Why do I mention that? Because once I forwarded into my career is when my mental health began to uh, really take a hit, as it were. So, really, really struggled with that, and tried to function having children as best I could. Um, Amazingly, I had left my job at a clinic because I felt it. I felt the compensation coming on, and uh, it was bad. I had to quit my job, but amazingly, um, my psychiatrist put me on a different medication, and it worked. One shift in a medication, and it worked. And I felt great. I felt quote unquote normal. I was able to function. Um, I didn't have any scary thoughts. A few weeks later, I was diagnosed with cancer. So I only had that break for a few weeks, and then I had the stage 4 diagnosis. Since then, I've been really cool about this and coping and functioning with my family and not isolating myself and reaching out to people with whom I call friends. Um, the downside is that as of a few weeks ago, I had this what I call a bomb cyclone of emotional energy and wanting to harm myself and didn't know where any of this came from. It just hit. I was missing conversations. I knew I couldn't remember things that I should remember. Terrifying. They're just now coming down a little bit with some medication. Um, I don't know if this is related to my past years of mental health issues. But what I do know is that I've been reaching out for help all over the place because I cannot live like this. I have to fight cancer. It's really hard to fight mental health on top of that. So it's a huge juggle, a huge juggle. I think first and foremost, I have that with my family. My husband in particular has been an incredible support. And, I'm sure a lot of us say that I feel particularly blessed, as it were, to have him in my life and to help guide me through this when I don't feel like I have the capacity to. My children too, they're teenagers, and it has affected them profoundly, sometimes in really trying and difficult ways. But still, through that, they've been incredibly supportive. I have looked to my newfound friends, big support. Just these past few weeks when everything kind of decompensated. My oncologist um, has hooked me up with psychiatry, has hooked me up with the patient counseling unit within my cancer center. I can't ask for any more support than that. I feel like there have been times when I haven't had it, even though I've never really felt physiologically that I've had cancer. I just haven't. I haven't felt anything. Um, so there are times when I feel like I want to have hope. Will I ever begin to feel something? Will that be my downhill slide? Um, I don't know. But what I do know is that when I look at my family each day and our dog and all the help I've had, it gives me the hope I need when I can't generate it myself. I wanted to share my story because I wanted to give shed some light on the intersection between cancer and mental illness. That I think, at least in my experience, they're inextricably bound. And we can look at the difficulties, the fears, the loss of hope even. And then if you already have mental illness such as I do, with bipolar 2 disorder and features of depression and anxiety, you put that on top of that, and your experience is, I think, profoundly different than what I might have expected, which is just you deal with the fears that you have and the hope that you have, but I already have these issues on top of it. And so I'm trying to give voice to reach out, get the mental health help that you need in order to have the capacity to cope with a really scary diagnosis. Do not isolate. I have a tendency to isolate, frankly. Don't do that. There is help there, but you have to advocate for yourself and have your loved ones and friends help advocate for you to give you the confidence for you to be able to reach out and ask for the help you need. I got help through psychiatry and patient counseling. It's been invaluable to begin to tease these pieces apart of mental health and cancer. So I guess my advice is don't sit there by yourself. Reach out to the people you love and the help that's provided to you.